History of the War Powers Resolution. The first ever War Powers Act was put in place on December 18, 1941 by Franklin Roosevelt. It was created just 2 weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The first War Powers Act gave FDR a great deal of power in order to smooth war efforts. It allowed FDR to censor mail between the U.S. and foreign nations, along with rolling back stimulations on expensive branch agencies. This act had a deadline of 6 months before it was defunct. As World War II ramped up, the Second War Powers Act was passed. The Second War Powers Act gave even more power to the executive branch. This act gave the military the power to seize land for Army and naval use. It also allowed the government access to census data relating to race. The creation of the War Powers Resolution. Skipping forward 30 years, the War Powers Resolution worked as a check of the executive branch's power during the Vietnam War. The War Powers Resolution required the President to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing troops to armed combat. It also requires that troops stay no longer than 60 days in armed combat. This heavily slowed the President's decisions to further combat actions.
While the resolution is legally active, many presidents have ignored it. For instance, Bill Clinton's bombing campaign in Kosovo that lasted 2 weeks longer than the 60-day limit. Obama left many units of Marines in Libya for months longer than legally allowed, along with Obama and Trump's joint effort to deploy ground troops in Syria, despite the rejection of their plea for action. But do these presidents have the right to command their military as the commander-in-chief? The pros of a strong executive branch when dealing with the military is a better defense of the nation. All the above examples were anti-terrorism efforts. If retaliations of any of the countries were mitigated by the illegal actions taken, can't be answered. Especially during wartime, the executive branch excels at getting things done without long, drawn-out processes. This was the exact reasoning for the First and Second War Power Acts. Without these acts, it could be theorized that the Second World War would have lasted much longer if the American forces were delayed and weaker. Without the Second War Powers Act, the agencies that created and aided the Manhattan Project likely wouldn't have been successful. As one of the largest militaries in the world, being disorganized would make the size obsolete. When human lives need to be defended, a quicker and concise action is needed. While it can't be debated to derive an agreed idea, it delivers the information quickly from the president to the troops. While efficiency is great, a blitz of information does not mean it's the best way of handling certain situations. The president has led the country and numerous men to their deaths. The tedious deliberation phase produces well-thought-out plans. Many of the single-minded decisions of the president did result in positive outcomes, but may have done just the opposite. The Bay of Pigs invasion and the invasion of Cambodia both resulted in countless lives lost for no positive outcome. In modern times, weapons of war have become more and more deadly. If we see a president that blindly leads the country into war, it could spell disaster on a planet-wide scale.
How does this affect us? Many of the people in our class are of age or close to of age to enlistment. The reduced power of the president can help suppress the outbreak of war. A large or world war, if you will, could result in a draft. While war affects troops, it can affect the people supporting the effort at home. An open war would likely result in rationing. On the other hand, the weaker executive branch would be slower to respond to terrorist attacks on a large scale. An unopposed terrorist attack could take the lives of many people we know or ourselves because of our proximity to the city of Houston.
So we're looking at a military that is tired, that has been stretched too thin with multiple deployments. We've had 2.7 million service members have went on, I think it's 5.4 million deployments over the last 20 years. We have military families that have been struggling. We have National Guard. National Guard has contributed 35% of the man and woman power in these 20-year wars. They're